How to Run Your Building is proudly sponsored by Schneider Buchel, the preeminent and trusted legal partner for co-ops, condominiums, and homeowners associations across New York State. With a team of skilled attorneys and a singular focus on community association law, they tackle everything from high-stakes litigation and contract negotiations to day-to-day legal challenges. Whether it's resolving disputes, securing financing, or ensuring smooth governance, Schneider Buchel delivers innovative solutions tailored to each community's unique needs. Discover how they can support your board at schneiderbuchel.com. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
Welcome to Habitat's Management Series. I'm Emily Myers, and this is one of several roundtable conversations with the executives of leading New York City property management firms. The topic for this discussion is strategic initiatives that drive results, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ira Meister, founder and president at Matthew Adam Properties, Anton Lekic, co-founder of Murray Hill Management, and Jamie Sikorski, Senior Vice President at AKAM. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So when we consider what it takes to manage a property and the initiatives that can add value, compliance and financial planning come to mind. And our conversation is going to touch on these issues. And we'll also discuss some specific examples of co-ops and condos, because I think the minutiae can often help illustrate the broader picture. But first, Jamie, what are the initiatives that drive results for the buildings in AKAM's portfolio?
I think that the key to all of this comes down to planning, communication, and between those two items, they cover a plethora of things, of course, but really getting ahead of it, goal setting at the top of the discussion, and then having regular check-ins to both, make sure we're on the right path and make adjustments as needed, as well as update any information as you get it.
So how do you ensure boards stay focused on strategic goals?
So I think that the key, again, at the beginning of any kind of project or goal is to have an open discussion, taking very precise notes on those discussions and having overall arching goals of whether it's financial or quality of life or whatever it may be, to always have a target to go towards, and then to utilize both weekly communications as well as board meetings to provide updates. I think it's important to have a balance between written communications as well as open discussions, because one is more tangible and you can always reference back to it, but the other also can open up the discussion and you get more nuanced information or questions where you can really drive in and focus in on those results to make sure we're on track.
Interesting. Anton, what's the priority for you at Murray Hill Management as you think about generating results for the buildings in your portfolio and also, I suppose, your management company?
So Jamie was exactly to the point. She was right about it. Communication. The most important part. Yes, the boards are decision makers, and therefore they really have to be properly informed about whatever is a task that is actually in front of us. Sharing that same communication with the shareholders is very important, because as a cooperative communities or condo communities at the common institutions, we have to all work together and have them on the same page as their board manager or the directors. So yes, communication is the most important. And actually maintaining that healthy cooperative community is the most important.
Yes, and I guess as I suppose the compliance landscape expands, Ira, what thoughts do you have? I know that you've watched with interest New York's shift towards electrification and away from fossil fuels. How does the compliance piece of the puzzle play into your sort of strategic initiatives?
It's kind of interesting. I got involved with these compliance and energy efficiency, sustainability, and all the fun stuff that goes with 30 years ago. So what we try to bring to our clients is communications, as Jamie said, and a lot of transparency. If you're going to meet with the board, you go with a plan. You don't go, but I heard XYZ building did this, or maybe you want to do that. But you come with a game plan to the board. And, here's our suggestions. Here's our ideas. Here's the 800 new rules and regulations the city put out there we have to now comply with. Here's the deadlines. Give you a good idea what it's going to cost you, what the payback is. So there's a lot of moving parts. And they we encourage the boards to be very transparent with the unit owners and the shareholders, because it's inevitable that a lot of these projects will end up costing either through using reserves or using assessments. So we try to get it out there so everybody knows what's going on.
Of course, financing these types of projects is one of the most challenging parts of the process. I mean, do you have strategies for getting buildings on a solid financial footing?
Yes. Well, first, you have to know what the numbers are going to be. That's the first thing. What grants are available through Con Ed, through NYSERDA, through any other projects. Even manufacturers right now are scrambling, and they're offering different incentive programs to buildings. So you really need to get your numbers together, what the incentives are, what it's going to cost. Then we look at the budget, what you have, what you don't have, and how do we get from point A to point B so we can accomplish this. I think a lot of it also is presenting what the savings is going to be. People seem to accept savings more than efficiency or more than what it's actually going to do for the environment or for their health or for themselves. Fortunately, a lot of it's dollar driven, but we try to get them to explain it both ways. What's dollar driven, what's health driven, what's good for the environment, what's good for the people in the building. There's a tremendous amount of moving parts, and we show them what the financing is available. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to come up with.
Yeah, I mean, as you point out, Ira, there's a lot of research and information that needs to go in order for the boards to make decisions. Jamie, how do you help boards be the decision makers rather than, get bogged down in the research?
Yeah, so I think, Ira said it, you come with a plan for the board to consider. And there is a lot of research that's involved in that. It comes down to not only what the project will entail or the compliance item or whatever it may be, but what other buildings are doing, what other companies are doing, what other industries are doing. Because it's not just doing the same old thing again, it's finding new and interesting ways. There's some things where there's the best course of action, we'll make a recommendation. Other times you're going to have the ideal solution, the necessary solution, and then sometimes this is what you have to do. And so the board can make these decisions by balancing, again, going back to those overall arching goals with what the building has from a financial standpoint and from a timing standpoint. And they're able to make those decisions with all of the information, keeping the priorities on what their overall arching goals are.
Anton, can you share a story in which you've worked with a building to ready them for Local Law 97 compliance and perhaps what you've learned from the experience?
Local Law 97 really put the stringent limits on the carbon footprint, and we are all moving towards trying to prevent those penalties. And even the best bet is really, like Ira said, electrification, period. And that's the ultimate goal. Initially, I started, like Ira said, 20 years ago with the federal programs, federalization. WAP was a really good opening for all of us to actually bring our efficiencies up and the waste of energy down. So I do heavily work with the weatherization systems, and usually that would be a first step, because first you really take care of the envelope of the building and make sure that you're not leaking that new windows, roof insulation, basement, heating improvements and all this. So the efficiency is up. After that, I usually go to multifamily energy efficiency, and through them, I get my grants or whatever is possible to actually fortify the financial situation of the property. In other words, check of $100,000 or whatever it is from NYSERDA really helps a lot to improve the reserve fund, which you definitely need once you want to go to climate friendly. If that's the next step. I found that in my Queens properties, at least, it's very specific to the community. So you realize that the climate friendly home fund actually has to qualify you based on some social situations in the neighborhood. Not everybody does qualify. There are 3 different ways of qualifying, and you have to research and find out where does your building fall under the federal regulation, maybe city. So find why could you qualify? That's the first step. Secondly, the lines of communication open. So I did a building in Flushing, a real landmark building. We did what? We got new windows, we got insulin, we got brand new boilers and hot water heaters. And that building gained about $1 million of investment from the government in all those different projects. In addition to that, we got over $300,000 in the reward. That's how I gave the explanation to the boards from the efficiency. Now, at that point, we went to climate friendly. The building is qualified. However, considering that we got a brand new boilers, brand new hot water heaters, the Southern Climate Friendly had to drop us because the new boiler hot water heaters are so efficient that we couldn't do the electrification. Start the electrification last year.
Okay, so an important part of the eligibility is how efficient your equipment is, and if it's a good equipment that is working efficiently, getting the funds to electrify is going to be more challenging. I think what you're drawing attention to as well, of course, is the research about eligibility for these financing programs and rebates is a really important part of the process.
Correct. That's how I positioned myself for the next property. So when I did the valorization, I minimized the improvements on the heating system and hot water system. So I did qualify, and right now we are in process of doing electrification in that particular co-op, which is also in Flushing. We did qualify through the Con Edison, through the research and development for climate friendly fund, and they are in the process, like Ira said, manufacturing and type of the units that go in are really challenging because every building is different, obviously, and every individual setup is different. But yes, we did locate a good quality units, and very, very important fact is that you have to keep the representatives from NYSERDA in contact constantly. We have a bi-weekly meetings with the board and with the NYSERDA representative.
Okay, interesting. So, and I'll just point out that obviously the Climate Friendly Homes Fund is the fund administered by the Community Preservation Corporation, and it provides financing for existing 5 to 150 unit buildings in the state with a focus on replacing older and less energy efficient systems with all electric. And then there's the WAP you mentioned, which is the Weatherization Assistance Program, which helps income eligible homeowners with energy conservation measures to bring down the cost of heating and cooling. Ira, are you working with a specific building right now to prepare them for the future when it comes to energy efficiency and local law 97 compliance? And can you share some of the details?
Sure. We're already on the project. We have 2 projects in progress right now. One is a 41 unit luxury loft condominium unit. And the second is a 325 unit co-op unit, another larger building. We've already started on the smaller building and going electrification. It's a 100-year-old building. It was rehabbed in 1984 and has done progress in the past several years. Right now we're starting with electrification. We started with the boilers. We've started with looking at heat pumps and different sources for hot water. It's kind of funny because we're being very, very careful. A lot of new companies there have jumped into the fray, allowing heat pumps and all this fun stuff. I tell everybody, try to go with a proven entity. Back 30 plus years ago, I unfortunately inherited a building through a bank. There was a condominium that did not work out well. It had the first heat pumps installed in New York. Heat pumps are a great project. The only problem was they were never tested in New York, and the cold weather that we used to have here just didn't warm the apartments. So we ended up having to install electric coils in the ductwork of all these units. And eventually that company down in Texas, where everybody was named Bob, went out of business. So we've been looking at different realistic players there. There are American Standard, there are Train, there are people, Carrier, real companies out there that have jumped into this with proven technology. So one project on the 41 unit project, we are going with known name, with good equipment. People in the building are happy about it. They already have thermal pane windows, but right now we're going to opt for a triple pane window. So a lot of different things are going to happen there, and they've already decided that they're getting some outside money, but not a lot because it's a luxury buildings, but they're game for assessment And so we gauged out the assessment for them over the next 3 years. And some of the manufacturers and installers we're working with have self-finance for them. So it really made it a lot easier to accept. On the larger building, they had an absorption heat air conditioning unit, which basically used city steam to produce air. So we've removed that and we've installed what they call micro chillers in that building. And by installing these micro chillers that run on electric, they brought down their energy consumption annually by $500,000. So in less than 2 years, they've paid for their entire system. So right now, they're reaping the benefits of the system. In the apartments, we'll be doing similar changes to the units that they have there. Units, chiller units, cooler units in the apartments, we're going to be mapping them out to change them to electrify them. So it'll be a very, very energy efficient building. There are a lot of projects going on right now, and it's a very exciting time.
Gosh, interesting. I mean, presumably buildings might even come to you because they have a preference for energy efficiency with your background in terms of this. But there are obviously boards that are resistant to these measures. What's your approach with these types of buildings where they perhaps just can't get the funding in place, or they can't build the cohesion with the board to make the change they need to?
Show them the numbers. Show them what it's going to cost them if they don't comply. It all boils down to the numbers. Many of the boards don't look beyond numbers. They'll look at what they're saving for the environment, and I'm one of these environmental loving people. They don't look at that. It all comes down to dollars and cents. You have to prove it. Here's what it's going to be. Here's what you're going to save in energy. Here's what it's going to cost you in fines in the future. Now, why pay fines when you can invest that into your infrastructure?
Yeah. Jamie, I mean, we hear obviously a lot about emissions, Local Law 97, the deadline fast approaching to report. But of course, there's a massive compliance landscape, and capital planning is going to vary for each building. But funding big projects to stay ahead of repairs and meet compliance deadlines is key. Is there a co-op or condo in your portfolio that illustrates this?
Yeah, I actually have a building downtown. It's about 400 units, 42 stories, in addition to all of the Local Law 97 projects that they've known are on the horizon and approaching, and they're not looking at any potential fines for quite a long time. So they've got a little bit of room. And so probably about 8 or 9 years ago, they actually started thinking about the fact that we're going to have all these projects. And so we worked with them and created a capital plan and a financial capital plan over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and continue to update it. The big project that they were looking to map out is an elevator mod. They've got 3 sets of elevators, one going to high rise, one going to mid rise, and then one going to basement levels, which houses a host of amenities. And so we were able to map it out again at the very beginning using very rough numbers and then narrowing in. The strategic approach also was not to do all of the elevators at once, which everyone knows elevator projects are known for going sideways. And so, they started with the high rise. As with any project, the key is to map it out clearly, both from a financial standpoint and the steps of the project, but also to have a communication plan with the residents. Because if you map it out ahead of time to say we're going to communicate every 6 weeks and then put that on a calendar, it's very easy to lose track of those kinds of things and forget the impact that it has to residents. So we put all of that in place, and with each capital project, we allocated how frequent should we be providing updates. As I said, they started with the high rise, went through all of getting the recommendations from professionals, getting the peer recommendations from other buildings, both residential and commercial, bidding the project out, going through them, leveling the bids, all of that stuff. The project went ahead, it was very successful, but as with anything, you identified that there's areas that we could have done better on, whether it's because of circumstance or new information or just the reality of the circumstances. In this case, they actually decided to postpone the mid-rise until all of those could be worked out, made some tweaks in it, and then moved ahead, with the mid-rise project. They're in the process now of that, and it is certainly even more successful. And I think that the unit owners definitely appreciate that as well. Again, you've got to know your audience. In a luxury building, communication, effectiveness, getting feedback not only on how you're doing on budget, on time, but also on the impact of quality of life to residents. That's really important to get that data and then evaluate that data and weigh, sometimes it's worth it to spend a little bit more to impact residents less, or to shorten the length of the project. So to always be updating that, going back to the original timeline of the strategic planning of these projects. When we postponed the mid-rise elevator project, that kind of left a hole to be able to do a smaller capital project and reallocating that. And the key is to always be updating that, refining it, revising it as needed to make sure that you're always not only working on what you're doing right now, but looking ahead and making adjustments as you need to.
Gosh, interesting. Jamie, you're drawing the point that, when we talk about buildings, we're talking about residents. And clearly, buildings are full of people, and navigating the sort of human journey is as important, equally important as the return on investment in the infrastructure. Tony, do you have thoughts in terms of sort of cohesion for the residents and making sure that everyone's happy with the strategic plans?
In actuality, Jamie got it right that the communication is a key. In addition to that, the building staff and the managers are playing crucial role. The simple logistics of it and updating people on the regular basis about the progress of the project is very, very important. Sometimes the project itself, everything is going great. However, you have a government portion of the re-inspections. It happened to us that you are done with the elevator completely, but DOB doesn't have enough inspectors to come and actually give you that in-use permit. So everything has to be related to the shareholders, owners, and residents, so they know where the hold up is. It's not that we are not paying attention to the project. Of course, elevator projects sideways, and Amy is right.
Ira, you pointed out that you've been in the energy space for 30 years and in the management space for 30 years as well. But obviously you've seen massive changes. Can we just sort of pivot to where you see us being in 15, 20 years and how boards prepare for that? We've got a lot of uncertainty and change ahead. How are boards expected to prepare for that?
What we try to do, and I like to do, is tell, based on my past experiences, try to schedule, give them an idea what's coming up, what's coming down. Nobody ever expected electrification 15 years ago. Everybody was burning number 6 oil in the old days, then they went to 4, then to 2. So we try to give them better ideas of what to expect going forward. There are a lot of new plans that the city, state, and federal government had been working on. Under the new administration, that's all out the window. But we're going to go back to burning number 6 oil. Just a joke. But it is an interesting future, it's a very exciting future. But what I tell all our boards, and that anytime you're doing an extended 5-year plan, any kind of plan, that any plan is a living document. It's not written in stone. It will change. Last year we were working on a project where we were doing electrification project, and the price of the units quadrupled because they couldn't get the electronics they needed. There was a lot of problems with SIM cards, other cards. They just couldn't get the stuff they needed. And the prices they were getting at a premium. So we're trying to see, going forward, where we can get the most bang for the buck. Try to do projects now while we can get an idea what the actual cost is going to be. There isn't the crystal ball. I mean, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we try to let them know, like, here's what I see or we see what the future is going to be. Years ago, nobody expected thermal pane windows. Nobody expected any of these things. But we see it now, and it's funny. I had run into a student of mine back from NYU when I was teaching at NYU, and he says, "Oh, I know you, Mr. Meister. You're the godfather of green." I said, "Oh my God! At least I'm not the godfather of mafia." Geez, thank you. But it's cute, and that one of the things that we spoke about years ago are now coming to fruition now, and I enjoy it.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, you touched on tariffs, inflation, yeah. Tony,
Can
what
I
were you
just piggyback on that? Ira is right. As we are doing the electrification, every step is really important. Right now, every building that we are actually doing the electrification, we have to, hopefully not, but 90% of the cases, you have to upgrade your electrical panels, electricity supply, even maybe bring more power from the street. Now, when you are doing that, keep in mind that electrical stoves are coming. If you are bringing a new electrical panel to the apartment, make sure that they will have that room, the 30 amp with that electrical stove that is coming 2035 or whatever. It's slowly rolling in. In addition to that, the EV chargers that everybody is doing now because of the local law 55. Everybody thinks, oh, we have plenty of time. We really don't. At this point, when you're upgrading your electrical systems, you should make sure that you have enough power for the EV chargers also, because minimum 20% have to be provided, and then 5 years later, they're jumping to 40%. So of the parking spaces, we are doing EVs in several buildings at the same time. 3 of them are already done, and the garages are being upgraded with those chargers. So when you're planning on updating electric, do it in one step and work closely with Con Edison and your engineers to actually plan for enough electricity, not only for the heat pumps, but also for potentially individual hot water heaters that are located inside of the apartment.
Yeah. No, interesting. When you think about electrical capacity, and there are ways in which you can sort of do a partial electrification and then build on that. Jamie, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch on something that Ira said, about the crystal ball. And he gave the example of the very first heat pumps from a company that didn't work out. Our role is to try to show as much as we can on what's coming down the road. It's not necessarily to do things the fastest. It's to do things balancing the timing with a measured decision. That happened with cogen, where a lot of buildings jumped on, a little prematurely and, spent real resources trying to be the first and everything, or not even with that intention, but just to be proactive. And ultimately didn't have the benefits or the rewards that they were anticipating. So I think it's about utilizing the information that, comes not only from your management team, but from your professionals, your engineers, all of those things, and to really strategize about what it is. It's also about being very engaged with the local authorities. Ira mentioned politics, and I'm not going to touch on that, but speaking with the various authorities throughout the government, from DOB and DOT to your community boards, because there's a lot of resources out there, and being engaged with all those resources can get you a little more clarity. We're looking at the facade requirements that are changing. Now, there is definitely going to be benefits to that, but there's also likely going to be some pretty heavy lifts that come along with it. And as we know, a law passes, but then spends the next 5 years being clarified. And so the more information, and it's our responsibility to get that information and to work with the professionals to be able to present it. Going back to, Emily, one of your initial questions is, how do we set up a board to be decision makers as opposed to researchers and everything like that? And so it's combining all of these things to try to give them maybe not a crystal ball, but a somewhat hazy ball that they would be able to look through and then coach them through it.
Interesting. Yeah. And of course, you mentioned cogen, which is where gas is used to generate electricity. And of course, many buildings now finding that isn't to their advantage. Ira, do you have thoughts on that?
One thing also you have to realize that our beloved Con Edison really doesn't have the infrastructure in place to support all this. I just worked on an electrification project, and they said, well, it'll be 8 to 10 months before we can get you the electric you need. I said, does it exist under this block? No, we could probably bring it over from 5 blocks away. And the same thing we went through with gas. Same thing, just have enough gas to go around, or the infrastructure in place. I think that's going to be one of our biggest complications in electrification is the utilities. Con Ed wants to be the pipeline, but not the supplier, which is grand. But the pipeline has to be top line. And they're trying to do it, and just right now they're not at it. They're really trying. And one of the things I also noticed on an electrification project that I worked on, we worked on a project on East 77th Street, electrification project. Con Edison came back to us. They wanted to charge the client $180,000 for the connection. Wow. And that I had to fight my way up the chain there in order to get them to eat it. I said, and I explained, you're going to make this back in 2 years. Why am I paying this money now? So that's one thing that we have to be aware of. that yes, they're going to try to charge for a lot of these things, even though they're not supposed to charge for it, and that we have to make sure when you do go through a project, the engineer, people you're working with, can confirm with Con Ed before you spin your wheels right away that the infrastructure is in place to support it.
Yeah, and of course, Jamie pointed out community resources. And Tony, I know that your portfolio is very much in Queens, if I'm not mistaken. And you're able to tap into some of the resources that are offered in Queens.
Yeah, working closely with local politicians. I'm fortunate that our local government, Senator John Wu, and the community board leaders are really cooperative. I was able to actually make appointment and have several of these kind of roundtable discussions. DOB and HPD together in their offices. So it kind of became official. So we had our board members attend that. So we had a nice powwows. And in all honesty, they did help our co-ops to actually deal with some of the old facade issue violations and a reduction in the draconian penalties to the co-ops and condos that really they did nothing wrong except fall behind for one reason or the other. So yes, they are really a big help. In addition to that, the nicer engineering firms that they engage are really able to guide you tremendously.
So, we're talking a little about what we can predict for the future. And I know that COVID is very much in the rear view mirror, but I'm curious, Jamie, since COVID, people are obviously spending more time in their apartments. Are there issues that have come up related to this that might be a distraction for boards to stay on their long-term goals? Or is it encouraging people to commit to the long-term goals as a result?
I think the biggest difference that I've seen, I think part of it is people are working from home more. I think during COVID also, everyone was stationary. And so you started identifying more and more things. And I've noticed that since the pandemic, people are a lot more communicative. That can certainly be a good thing, and it generally is. But at the same time, there tends to be the squeaky wheel situation where you have people that are starting to monopolize a board's attention over things that are not necessarily as impactful as potentially other things or quieter wheels. And so with that heightened communication, there's also an expectation of an urgency in response. And so where I think pre-pandemic, if someone had a concern, and something as I don't want to say simple, but benign as a noise from a neighbor. Post-pandemic, that has escalated where it's an urgency that can sometimes distract. Again, I think that's the key to setting those overall arching goals and to stay on track at meetings and communications to make sure that we're focusing on the right things, but never forgetting anyone. So again, those people who are communicating a lot and having a lot of the frustrations, noise is a great example of something that has been escalating. When people work from home, the expectation is to have that still same quiet environment and all of those things. But at the same time, the people next door are the same people who are working from home that may be a pianist. And we've seen that situation where there's that juxtaposition. So I think getting ahead of it in proactively communicating, in bringing people together where you can, and then also setting guidelines on how much time we want to spend on each thing to make sure that we address every item. We don't want to just bury it or overlook it, but also not lose focus of something that could be equally important in the realm of the discussions.
It looks like, Tony and Ira, you support those thoughts. Just an opportunity to give your final thoughts. Ira?
Final thoughts. Basically, one, for boards, I always recommend, transparency. That's the key. You're not going to please everybody. It happens. That's life. I mean, we try our best. We're basically conduit. So we're the guys sitting in the middle, and unfortunately, everything's always our fault. But that's the nature of our business. It's a service business. And I tell everybody, just, be transparent, listen to what everybody has to say, and then work with the board and help them make the right decisions. And that's what we're all about.
Tony, you'd agree?
I definitely agree. The key is research, presentation, and working within the board with the people that actually get it So, in other words, make a time to kind of form a committee for a specific issue. Like Jamie said, is a noise issue. There are board members that are more inclined to deal with that portion of the quality of life. However, there are other board members that will understand better the energy project or financial situation of it. So before the board meeting, you should really reach out to those board members and prepare yourself and them so they could actually explain maybe in a more familiar way to them so their board could understand each other. And if you are delegating those kind of committees, then you are making it much faster and easier for everybody to understand and have some kind of consensus.
Interesting. Well, listen, thank you so much, guys, for this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for having us.
It sounds like basically long-term planning, compliance, communication, transparency. Those are the strategies basically for driving results in the city's co-ops and condos. I really appreciate your time and perspective. And thanks again for joining Habitat's management series. Stay tuned for more insights from Habitat on the topic of co-op and condo property management.